Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for taking the time in your testimony and for your service to our beautiful nation. The number 30 trillion stands out every morning I wake up, every night I go to sleep. $30 trillion is what our nation's debt is approaching. That's roughly $90,000 for every human being in our country, man, woman, and child. That equates to, I believe, about $1.2 million attributed to fair share for just the folks who have their cameras on this Zoom call here, if I'm doing my math correctly. These are massive deficit and debt numbers that we've been talking about. A common theme that I'm seeing in a lot of these testimonies and as we review the president's budget requests is that we're throwing big numbers at programs and we're not really sure how the execution of some of these programs has been over the last year through the pandemic, and we're not really sure where the money is actually going in the future on the heels of the pandemic. I want to tee off of something that Ranking Member Diaz-Balart brought up, which is this homeless assistance program. We spent about $4 billion on homeless assistance programs in the CARES Act. Only about 6% of that has actually been executed. There's another 3.5 in this president's budget request. There's another 5 billion in the package that we approved and sent out in March. And we still don't know yet what the footprint of this program is going to be within the American Jobs Act, but I got to believe that the American Jobs Act footprint is going to shadow all of those numbers by an order of magnitude. You mentioned that a lot of this money isn't being spent because we haven't really characterized where to spend it efficiently and effectively. And so you guys are taking the time to make sure that you're planning this correctly. I applaud that on the surface. I'm waiting for the answer on what exactly is the right number. How much do you need? I want to end homelessness. I come from California where there's a tremendous homelessness problem right now. There's mental health elements. Housing is tough because of the bureaucracy of our state. It's tough to build a home for less than $500,000. So if they've taken the time to plan this out, they've taken the time to slow down and figure out how much they need to spend and where, what is the right number? Because these numbers are literally big enough to solve world hunger if we do it correctly. And as the head of this organization now, you're accountable for the execution side of this. I'm glad you're happy with Congress and how much has been given to you, authorized and appropriated. I want us to be happy with you and making sure that this money translates into people getting off the street. So the question is, what do you need? What is the right number for the homeless assistance program? And how does that relate to the, call it the $12 billion that I just outlined that's already been appropriated for it?
Let me say first, I think you misunderstood. I didn't say HUD had to make a decision how it would be spent on the local level. The local communities need to make that decision. And I know that for the many years that I have been in Congress, my colleagues have always talked about local autonomy. So the local communities need to determine how to spend the money we have allocated, not HUD. So let me just make that clear. And secondly, let me just say that I don't know what it costs to take 580,000 people off the street. I don't know what that cost is off the top of my head. I do know this, though. We cannot afford not to address the homelessness problem in this country. So what does it cost to get housing for 580,000 people? I guarantee you it's more than what we've asked for. But we know that we are at a place where we are beginning to address it in a major way. So what we have said to people is we've allowed you now to have the resources to, if you need to find temporary housing, you can. If you want to build new housing, you can. But our goal is to make sure that no one is sleeping on the street.
So if I do the math, 585,000 homeless, if we were to purchase a home for each one of those folks at $250,000 per home, that comes out to $145 billion, which is a small fraction of what we are actually already spending on these programs. So I think that's the kind of diligence I think we're looking for. And I think the American population is wanting to just make sure that these things actually are making sense and that the money is going to where it needs to go. I understand the nuance of the local communities having the driving force in those conversations. I agree with that. That's the right thing to do. But let's make sure that we're not continuing to just throw money at these programs while the capacity questions aren't getting necessarily answered and in the interest of our community. So with that, Madam Secretary, I'm out of time, but I'll yield back to you for the remainder.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, may I just answer that last question just very briefly?
Yes, ma'am.
I think that that's a very nice way to try to put that together, but I would suggest this. As a mayor of a city, I know what it takes to acquire land. I know what zoning costs. I know what parking costs. I know what cement streets cost. It's not just $250,000 for a home. And I don't know what kind of home that is, but if you live in California, if it's $250,000, it's a shack. So I think that we have to look at it in a fair way and not just throw numbers at people's lives.
I agree. 145 billion is a small percentage of the 12 billion that we.
Gentlemen's time's expired. Ms. Clark, please. Ms. Garcia, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks again, Madam Secretary. I just want to close out the earlier conversation. I do this not to be pedantic. I'm just trying to make sure that we all really appreciate the magnitude of these dollar values and the coordinate systems that we're working in. You mentioned that a $250,000 home would be a shack.
In California.
In California, and that's where I'm from. That's where I'm going. So just bear with me. I would, remember that's the median home value nationwide. So I just want to be respectful of some of these states that aren't challenged with some of the barriers that we have in California. And the $213 billion footprint for housing within the American Job Act is kind of what informs where I'm coming from on this. These are significant numbers. So when I do that math and land on 145 billion being able to buy for $585,000, $250,000 homes, that's not hyperbole when we start looking at some of these upcoming programs and projects. With that all in mind, what can we do at the federal government? Stand by. What can we do at the federal government level to help states like California, where right now it is physically impossible to break ground, get the permits, get the CEQA qualifications done, and build a home for less than $500,000? Is there something that we could collectively do, either through federal agencies or helping deregulate from the top down somehow that you can see as a path forward? Otherwise, we don't really have solutions to affordable housing in California specifically.
Can I just say first, I appreciate very much your concern about taxpayer dollar. Listen, I was a mayor when we had to balance budgets. That's one of the first things that threw me off when I came to Congress. So I understand that we have to be good stewards and good sheriffs. I know it's funny, but it's really
true. It sounds like a novel idea, but I appreciate what you just said. Absolutely, we need to get back to that.
I think though that what we have to think about is how much this is influenced by local governments, and that's why I started out by saying when I was a mayor, there are things that we could do in our communities to assist people in building, whether it be zoning reform, whether it be abatements, there were so many things, so many tools in our toolbox, but it starts with local governments. And I think one of the things that we have to look at really is zoning reform. And I'm hopeful that not just the state of California, but across the country, we will take a real serious look at what it costs. Something as simple as a parking requirement might save you tens of thousands of dollars on a piece of property. Something as simple as a lot size might change something significantly, but there are so many things that we can look at. I just hope that we can finally get to that discussion, because I'm with you 100%. We have to find a way. Otherwise, we cannot build affordable housing.
Well, I know you got a full plate and you're ramping up in a busy time, but I would welcome, and we extended this offer to Secretary Buttigieg on the transportation side of things, but when you look at how programs go sideways, unfortunately, California is sometimes a role model on the challenges that we may be facing here as a nation soon. It would be nice to be able to get a bipartisan fire team to come look at what those barriers to entry are for lower income housing. I live in a district That's 40% Hispanic. I am Hispanic myself, and these challenges are real for the not only the minorities but everyone in California now. The cost of construction is just astronomical. So I think it's worth putting together a small team to come look at what the challenges are, what layer of government is creating the challenges, and seeing how we can remove some of these barriers. Because in the end, I'm not trying to aggravate when I'm asking questions about our deficit or our budgets, and we're all trying to do the right thing. What I'm trying to do is make sure that when we spend, $5 billion on a homeless assistance program, that it starts behaving like it's $10 billion, and that it's applicable to states like mine in California and New York, where that dollar just doesn't go as far. So if you're willing to commit not a lot of resources, I think not a lot of time. I think it's just us really looking at root cause effects on what is driving the housing affordability problem in states like ours. That would be fantastic.
I think it's a great idea, and count us in. We'd be happy to be involved.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank you again for your service, and appreciate your remarks today.